Welcome to the final day of candidate question times for the 2022 Manchester Student Union elections, hosted by the Manchester Media Group, the UOM student media platform. I'm Shekhar Talwar, co-news editor for the Mancunian. This week, we've been running candidate hustings for 8 full-time executive officer roles. Last night, we heard from candidates from Wellbeing and Liberation, Science and Engineering, and Research officers. The exec officers are the top tier of the union student roles. They have full-time jobs paid £20,403 for the year to represent all students and influence their experience throughout university. These live streams are a chance for you to meet the candidates for each role and hear them answer questions on topics suggested by Manchester students. Let's meet, the activities and culture officers work with students to improve their experience in university, while also advocating and celebrating the student community. For organizing events to ensuring funding, this role is all about championing students, societies, and groups. Let's meet our candidates, Sophie Todd and Robbie Beale. Except for that, we also have 5 other candidates, namely Yibin Peng, Kai Jian Chan, Naomi Lilwood, Faisla Adim, and Christian Saras. To start off, candidates will have 1 minute to give an introductory speech about themselves and their manifestos. When the time is up, I'll raise my hand, and they should finish at the end of their sentence. We'll start with Sophie Todd.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a final year PPE with International Studies student. My manifesto focuses on 4 main areas. First of all, funding and resources for societies, activities, and students. Student engagement, increasing and making student engagement more inclusive and accessible in student societies and events. And also employability, making sure that our students don't feel like they're going into the big world of work all on their own. And also on supporting activism on campus in terms of social justice, climate justice, transparency about our fees, and more support from the university.
Thank you. Robbie Beale.
Hey, I'm Robbie. I'm a 3rd year history and politics student, though I seem to spend a lot more of my time running events for Gigs and Bands Society. My manifesto focuses around creating a creative community for students to be a part of. So key points is an all-university creative exhibition in the city centre to give people a chance to showcase their creative talents. I'd also run a new student night out to really set an example of how to run a safe night out for students. And then also providing lots more support and training for societies to better protect the welfare of their members. Thanks very much.
Now it's time for the questions. These have been written on topics based on topics that are submitted by the student body. You'll each have 1 minute, after which I shall raise my hand again and indicate when the time is to wrap up. The first question is, with hundreds of societies and student groups linked with the student union, what plans do you have to support, maintain, and develop the extracurricular activities on offer to students? We'll start by Robbie Beale.
So I know exactly how difficult it is to run a student society, having set one up myself in September. One of my key points, which I'm really passionate about, is running knowledge share sessions for student leaders. Issues such as finance, accessibility, safety, and welfare are really difficult to deal with as a society leader at times, and there's not nearly enough training involved. So I'd love to run knowledge share sessions so that student leaders can support each other and develop links across the university and between universities. But in addition to this, I'd also like to source some formal training, particularly around welfare and safeguarding issues, because I think they're really undercatered for by the university.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Yeah, I also know how difficult it can be running a student society. I'm part of both Feminist Collective and PPE Society. I agree with Robbie that there's nowhere near enough support in terms of sort of facilitating sessions for student leaders around safeguarding and well-being. I also think that money is a massive issue for some of our societies. More funding from UOM would be great to be allocated towards our societies, and the societies team already do great work in terms of training students on society finance, but better advertising both society activities and also the sessions that the societies team put on to society leaders and members of these societies is the best way to engage everyone in both finance, safeguarding, well-being, and just creating like a great student experience for everyone within these societies.
Thank you. Our second question is, representing international students is a key part of your job description. And when speaking to them, we found out that they often feel like they've forgotten or disconnected from university life, despite their high fees. What are the key issues facing international students, and how would you like to address them? We'll start by Sophie.
So I have also had an experience as an international student myself. I studied abroad last year at a university in Paris. So to a certain extent, I can empathise with the feelings that international students have, feeling slightly left out or sort of marginalised from general student community. I think it's really important to advertise student events and student societies to international students, places where we know that they're living. A lot of international students tend to live in city rather than in Fallowfield campus. It's about really bringing societies to them, because sometimes it can be really overwhelming, especially in a city like Manchester, where we've got 400 societies, to know what's available to you and how to get access to it. I think it's about bringing advertising both online and also physically to the spaces where we know international students are likely to see the advertising, to really cater to their needs. We also have a really great international society that I think that the society team, although they're not an actual affiliated society, could work really closely with to facilitate that.
Thank you. And Robbie?
Yeah, I totally agree with Sophie that it seems like there's that disconnect because, I mean, in part, international students tend to be sort of more towards the city. But I think another problem that people don't really speak about is British drinking culture, because it seems like every society thinks that every social has to have alcohol involved. So I'd love to move away from that. And I'm planning to develop links with various venues, cafes, and bars and restaurants across the city, which I've done before in a role for a local city council, so that societies can host a really wide variety of events that don't just involve going to the pub. On top of this, one of my key manifesto points is running a creative exhibition in the city centre, and that'll be art, dance, all sort of creative arts. I know we've got a thriving Indian dance society, all sorts of other fantastic international societies that I'd love to get along to that. So yeah, getting away from alcohol and building links in the city centre.
Thank you. Our third question is, what are the areas of student activities do you think could benefit from more funding and more funding facilities and or support? So we'll start this one with Sophie again. Sorry. All right. What areas of student activities do you think could benefit more from funding, facilities, or support?
I think that societies in particular really are like the backbone of the student community. I myself have really found my feet by working with and within societies. There are great funding opportunities available, but funding isn't sort of secured for every society every year. I think that increased funding for societies to make sure that every society starts off with enough money to get on their own 2 feet, to make sure that they're putting on events in a way that's inclusive and accessible and there for everyone, is definitely an area that needs more funding and support. And I also just think that student activities are really great, and it's a really great experience for our student leaders. And I think more support from the SU would be really great to help people with event management skills. So some more training in terms of event management would be great as well.
Great, thank you. And Robbie?
Yeah, I think financially speaking, societies do have a pretty rough time. Certainly more money is always going to help. I think the areas that really need more funding is the training that I mentioned earlier, so that people feel like they're actually well equipped to run a society. But on top of that, I think creative spaces, I'm currently working towards getting a proper band rehearsal space at the university. And that's been done through funds from the societies team that Camilla and the societies team, so our current activities officer, have set up this year, which is fab. But I think another root of the problem is actually just how complicated the finance process is for societies. So on my manifesto, I'd love to streamline the finance process, putting a bit more trust into our student leaders to actually manage their finances themselves, rather than having to go and verify and validate it externally the whole time. So I think actually, whilst more funding is really important, streamlining the finance process could really solve a lot of those issues.
Great. Thank you. And for our last question, we have, how will you make sure that events are inclusive to students with disabilities, those who don't drink, community university, and more? So this will start with Robbie.
So this academic year, Sid, one of our disability officers, has made it compulsory for all societies to publish accessibility information with all of their events, which I think is fantastic. Something that we're trying to build into our work at Gigs and Bands Society. So I've already drawn up accessibility information for Academy 3, just down the corridor, the Students' Union Bar, cafes in Withington. So what I do is, in conjunction with building links with venues across Manchester, I would just sort out all of that accessibility information myself to create one centralized library where societies can access all of that. So I think it's really about making sure that society leaders have all of that information at their fingertips and don't have to go trawling through the back ends of venue websites to find it. And then also just advertising these events properly so that people know that they are accessible.
Thank you. And Sophie?
Yeah, also I was going to mention about Sid's Senate proposition, making sure that societies are publicising their accessibility information. I work on Feminist Collective, and Sid is also involved, and we've been held as an example of how societies really can publish meaningful accessibility information. And I'd really like to work with the societies team, Naz and Camilla, for example, who have been putting on really, really great accessibility sessions for our societies. That's something that I just think needs to continue into next year. Also in terms of making sure that students who say commute or don't drink, it is really about training for societies. We also had a great session this year about things like timing of events that could really help students that commute. I think we need to hear from the student population who are commuting or who don't drink to really hear what they want to say about timings that suit them, venues that suit them, activities that suit them. It really is about engaging with students to find out what they want from our societies so that we as a team can provide that for them.
Thank you. Now, both of you will get a chance to have a very quick closing statement. If there's anything you haven't had the chance about talking yet, you can take this moment now for that. We'll start with Robbie again.
I just want to say thanks very much for having me on today. So my manifesto focuses around creativity, support and safety. So keep it real and vote Beale for a creative and caring community.
Sophie?
Yep, so my manifesto focuses around campaigning for a more inclusive, accessible, safe and fun student experience. Above all, student experiences can't be fun unless they are safe, inclusive and accessible. As I said, I wanted to look into funding and resources, student engagement, employability and activism. Activism is also something that's really important to me, although it's not necessarily in the job description. I think that Manchester is has a massive activist-based community, and it's really something that I'd like to support in this role. And one thing that I would just like to mention is that if I was to get this role, I'd really like to liaise with the university about being transparent about where our fees are being spent, especially in terms of international students who are paying higher fees up front. In this role, I feel that's really important. We can't necessarily improve the student experience without understanding where the money has come from and where it's being spent, so that we can facilitate better student engagement and a better student experience for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you both of you for participating today. To remember that there are 5 other candidates also running for this role. You can find their full manifestos on the manchesterstudentunion.com/lead-MCR. And with that, you can also find the manifestos for other roles. Coming up later today is the final candidate question time of the week, which is for the humanities officer role. Voting opens at 10 a.m. on Monday, the 7th of March for exec officer election and associate chair elections, with results announced live on March 11th. Do not miss the chance to have your say. Thank you.